on your guard. There are older and fouler things than orcs in the deep places of the world.
Everything out of the ordinary is to be reported.
Fiery the angels fell. Deep thunder rolled around their shores.
It may just be my imagination. Whatever it is that's watching, it's not human.
We are all now programmed for perfect happiness. Perfect happiness. Perfect happiness. Perfect happiness.
Quite an experience to live in fear, isn't it? That's what it is to be a slave.
It's a hard world for little things.
What we do in life echoes in eternity.
You know, there was a time in this country when smart people were considered cool. Well, maybe not cool, but smart people did things like build ships and pyramids, and they even went to the moon.
The Great Conjunction is the end of the world! Oh, the beginning?
It was a church. Do you know that word? Yes, there were still churches when I was a child.
But all things that are exposed are made manifest by the light. For whatever makes manifest is light.
You now belong to God, no longer to the devil.
What you said just now is quite extraordinary.
You're listening to Beyond Extraordinary with Natalina.
Hey everybody, welcome once again to Beyond Extraordinary. Hey, you know what? I promised in my last episode that going forward for future episodes, I was absolutely under no circumstances going to talk about the weather at the beginning of the episode. And I'm going to stay true to that promise. I'm going to keep my word, and I am not going to talk about the weather at all. Even though I desperately want to tell you some things about the weather, I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to talk to you right now about how it snowed this morning and it's the middle of May. I am definitely not going to discuss how freezing cold and windy it is outside and it's supposed to be right on the cusp of summertime. I'm not going to mention those things because I promised I would not talk about the weather. So, hey, per usual, this is Natalina, and I'm so glad that you've joined us. This is a really great episode. This is part 2 in our ongoing series about cults, and the cult we are going to discuss on this show is Scientology. Why? Why are we talking about Scientology? Why should this be important to any of us? Well, I will tell you, Scientology is not a simple self-help group. They're not benign. They are not harmless. They are a powerful corporate conglomerate organization that wields power and control beyond what they should be allowed to because of their tax-exempt status and their vast war chest of wealth. People have been hurt. People have died. People have been abused beyond what should ever be fathomable. And it's all under the banner of Scientology. They masquerade as self-help, and they proclaim that you can be any faith that you want and still be a Scientologist, but you will soon find out that that is absolutely 100% untrue. To accept the tenets of Scientology is to reject any other faith system. So don't believe it. Don't buy into it. The information you're going to hear on this show tonight is going to be crucial to your understanding and hopefully helpful to you if you encounter anyone in your life who is considering checking out whether it's from Scientology or just reading Dianetics, the book which sort of lays out the quote unquote science of Scientology. Keep this information at hand, and you never know when you're going to need it, and it might turn out to be really, really important. Scientology is kind of at the forefront of discussion in a lot of circles right now in popular culture, especially with the release of the HBO documentary Going Clear. If any of you out there have not seen it yet, I highly recommend trying to find a way to watch it because it is riveting and fascinating mind-blowing and disturbing. But because this documentary was so popular, a lot of people are talking about Scientology. I had actually arranged to have this conversation with tonight's guest well before Going Clear even came out. And there was a series of speed bumps in the way of us getting a chance to actually chat. And I actually do have to give a huge shout out to Julian Charles of The Mind Renewed. That's at themindrenewed.com, because he is the one who facilitated this meeting between myself and tonight's guest. And I cannot thank him enough, because Pete Griffiths, the guest that is on the show tonight, was an invaluable resource about the Church of Scientology. And the reason is because he himself is a former Scientologist. He was very deeply involved in the Church of Scientology. In fact, he was introduced to the cult by his brother, and soon both Pete and his wife were staff members at the Church of Scientology. And because of this, that he has a very intimate knowledge of the inner workings of this bizarre and secretive and sinister organization. So Pete is a wonderful guest. I hope that you listen to the whole show. There's one point in the show, about maybe 2/3 of the way through, where it kind of sounds like I'm starting to wrap up. I ask him to name, his websites and that type of thing. But keep listening when you get to that point, because we end up talking for another 30 minutes, and some of the best info comes after that point. So listen all the way to the end, and it's just so chock full of information. We could have done another hour. I swear to you, this was a really, really enlightening and informative show. Scientology, they are in places that you wouldn't even expect. And I reveal in this episode a few different encounters of my own that I've had with Scientology, in some cases without even realizing it was Scientology. They're just everywhere. They play nationwide commercials during the Super Bowl, which are always very, very disturbing. They buy up ad space via Google. It's really something else to witness the power that this religion wields. So let's get into that. I'm not going to talk too much more about it, because we really, really discuss all of these things and more in the interview. So thankful to Pete for being so gracious with coming on the show. And if this show interests you or moves you in any way, if you find the information useful, I really recommend taking the link to the show and sharing it on social media. If you want to know how to connect with Extraordinary Intelligence and the Beyond Extraordinary radio program on social media, I would recommend you go to our primary website, which is extraordinaryintelligence.com. And in the right-hand sidebar, you're going to find links to our Facebook, which is facebook.com/Beyond Extraordinary Radio. You're going to find a link to our Twitter and Pinterest, Google+, all of that. All the links to everything you need are at extraordinaryintelligence.com. Drop us a comment, drop me an email, and be sure to tell your friends, share the links widely, and we appreciate it so much. You can also listen to this show via iTunes or Stitcher, and the links to both of those things are right on the site. If you listen via iTunes or Stitcher, please consider leaving a rating or a review. Appreciate it so much. Gosh, some of the things that I read on there, they make me blush, you guys. So with all of that said, thank you everyone who has been so wonderful with all of this technological issues that I've been having, you guys, with my computer getting fried, and I'm still what I'm working on right now, you guys, is a very cobbled together little workstation with very subpar equipment, but that is hopefully going to change eventually when I can afford to get a new desktop that got fried from the power surge we had a month ago or a few weeks ago, whatever it's been now, I lose track. But it's been a techno nightmare here at my house, but on the bright side, the Lord always provides, and so I am able to bring this show to you with the equipment that I have. So here we go. Thank you so much for listening, and here we go with Pete Griffiths, ex-Scientologist, on Beyond Extraordinary Radio. has heard about the Church of Scientology in some fashion. Some consider it to be a wacky cult, while others think it's just a harmless self-help group. If it were up to Scientology, they'd have us call it a religion. With the recent HBO expose based upon the book Going Clear, Scientology's dirty secrets have hit the mainstream in ways that must have its hierarchy in a state of panic, and yet, since its very inception, Scientology has faced ridicule and controversy, and there have been people speaking out about it for years. They somehow managed to keep drawing in recruits, albeit probably to a lesser extent these days. My guest for this episode is Pete Griffiths, himself an ex-Scientologist. Once a devout member of the church, Pete now devotes himself to educating people about the dangers of Scientology and seeks to hold Scientologists accountable for the damage that they've done to countless lives. And we're going to talk about all of that today, to discuss the Church of Scientology, its origins, and how he personally became involved in the church and how he came to be a staunch anti-Scientology advocate. I am so pleased to welcome Pete Griffiths to Beyond Extraordinary. Pete, thank you so much for joining me today.
Natalina, it's a pleasure.
You know, this was a kind of a spur of the moment. You and I have been trying to connect for probably months now. And
yeah.
And for one reason or another, it hasn't worked out. And so here I am. It's 6:00 a.m. here, and I'm on my second pot of coffee, so I am raring to go.
I can cope with that. You rare. I'll follow along.
Okay. Well, Pete, as I mentioned in the introduction, that you actually were a member of the Church of Scientology at one time. I want to start by just having you tell us that story. Before we get into what Scientology specifically is and how it got started, I want to hear how you became involved, and take as much time as you need to tell that story.
Okay. It can be quite a long story and it can be quite a short story, but essentially my brother was the first family member to become involved, and then my ex-wife got involved as well. So I was aware that they were doing this thing that they seemed to be enthusiastic about and seemed to be doing them no harm. I'd heard of the subject through my own reading, and I was well aware that they were considered a cult by most people. But information like that isn't really real to you until it happens to you. It's just words until the words take on meaning, if you get what I mean. So I went along one day to collect my ex-wife from doing a course, and I got roped in for the personality test, which you may have heard of. Some people may have heard of this. You end up answering 200 questions about yourself, and some of the questions are quite personal and prying, but the end result of answering 200 questions about yourself is that you're looking inwardly at yourself, at what's right with you, what's wrong with you. So you're pretty much softened up, because it can take about an hour to complete this thing. So you're well softened up at that time. When you've done that, they give you your evaluation, which consists of a graph with high points and low points. And I know from when I was in Scientology, you don't dwell on the high points, you concentrate on the low points. Surprise, surprise. Let's say, for example, like one of the first ones, I think, has happy at the top and depressed at the bottom. So if it registered happy, you wouldn't worry with that one at all. You'd go to the next one. However, if it did say depressed, you simply say to the person, this shows you're depressed. Now, they said that to me, and I said, no, I'm not depressed at all. Why would you even say that? And they counter that with, this is what you've told us about yourself, and you've no answer to that. You've no answer because you've just answered all those questions. So that stage of the whole Scientology procedure is a very, very clever and diabolical and elaborate con to get you softened up and ready to accept anything that they might say or try to sell you. Now, in my case, they couldn't get a specific ruin. And just quickly to explain, a ruin is what Scientologists consider that everyone has everyone has a ruin in their life. And it could be something as minor as trouble talking to girls or boys. It could be problems at work. You know, it could be whatever you can think of that could ruin someone's life. Scientology has an answer for it. And I mean that, you know, whatever you come up with, they have an answer. My ruin was that I didn't have a ruin. So they got me on, well, could you be more able? And at the time, I said yes. After years of thought, I'm not sure that an able person can be more able. I think you can improve aspects of your abilities. For example, if you knew nothing about acting and wanted to learn how to act, you could learn that. If you had problems talking to a group of people, say from a podium or a stage, you could learn how to do that. You could learn how to become an accountant or a bookkeeper. You know, you can always add another aspect to your skill set, shall we say. So the concept that I could improve, I bought into. As I say, now I'm not too sure. I mean, can a healthy person be more healthy? Yeah, to some degree. Can a pregnant person be more pregnant? No. You know, you got to draw the line at some point. Right. And I think the able people that get involved in Scientology, I'm not sure that they actually do increase their abilities. I think they simply use their abilities better, maybe. But whether they actually gain ability, I'm not too sure about that specific one. However, at the time, that's what I bought into. I bought into the concept that I could improve and they could show me how to do it. And I did the communication course in one weekend and went to work on the Monday feeling that I could communicate so much better than all my workmates. But guess what? I didn't know how to communicate that to them. So right away, there should have been a red flag flying right there. Because I've done a communication course. I know all about communication. They teach you the communication formula. Because don't forget that the whole of Dianetics and Scientology is based supposedly on science. Okay.
Right.
And this is all before they turned it into a religion. So, I mean, you're dealing with duplicity and trickery and deception right from the very start. Because even if a Scientologist says something, you can guarantee that basically it's just like somebody holding up a sign saying, I'm okay, when really you're not okay. You know, it's as simple as that. It really is. So there, like, you do this communication course, you learn these communication drills, which I found out later Hubbard stole from somebody else. Like a lot of this is all stolen from somewhere else. And you do change. I mean, you absolutely change. I've since found out that a lot of the procedures are hypnotic. And whether you hypnotize yourself or somebody else hypnotizes you, the end result's going to be the same. You're hypnotized. So
right.
That's what happened to me. I actually felt superior to people because I could now communicate. And as I said to you, I couldn't tell them. So really, I was actually worse off. Yeah. I was worse off. That's how I initially got involved anyway. And then, of course, when you've done one course, you do the next one. And in Scientology, each subsequent course costs slightly more than the previous course. So you need more and more and more money. And everyone reaches a point where, let's say you've got so much savings, or your weekly wage or monthly salary will allow you to do so much. And once you reach the sort of limit to that, then you're in trouble, unless you've got credit cards. So, or access to bank loan. What they do is, and this is actually something that's happened in Ireland to a friend of mine. He was taken by two head Scientologists to get a bank loan for a car, okay, and then hand over the check to Scientology. Let's not mince our words here. That is illegal, and there's a crime committed right there.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, yeah. But that's what they do. The other thing is with new people, oh, well, yes, I'd love to buy your wonderful book, but I've no money. Well, have you got your bank card with you? We'll go to the ATM. And Scientologists escort people to the ATMs to withdraw the cash to buy the book or the course or whatever it is. They've no qualms on asking for money. They've no qualms on asking you what you've got, what you're worth. Do you own your own house? I mean, they really get right into you to find out what you have and what's available to you. And as I say, they'll even have you take out car loans and hand the money over to them. So, yeah, it gets very, very ruthless because the whole pursuit within Scientology is about money. It is purely, simply money. There's nothing else. Despite what they say and despite what members say about how it's helped them, maybe it did. Maybe in the early stages it does help. But that's simply the bait on the hook. You know, that's what they use to get you entrapped. Right. As in my case, it was, can you improve? Well, yeah, okay. Well, show me. Let's do it. Friends of mine as well have done the same thing. They've heard about what they offer and said, okay, there's the money. Come on, give it to me. Give it to me. And they've all been disappointed. So, yeah. So there you go. So that's how I got involved, Natalina, anyway.
And, you know, it's interesting because you mentioned that it starts off with this personality assessment, which, in your words, how they start out from square one with deception. This test is called like the Oxford. What is it called? Oxford.
The Oxford Capacity Analysis.
And it has nothing to do with Oxford, correct?
Absolutely nothing. It's designed to deceive. It's designed to get a sort of air of authority. You know, they don't even say, oh, it is the university test. They don't go as far as to say that. But even calling anything Oxford, you know, I mean, in Ireland it would be Trinity College. You know, if you just called it the Trinity something or other. And just coincidentally, there's a chiropractic business run by Scientologists that have called themselves Trinity Chiropractic. So it's the same kind of thing being used. It's like if I was in England and called it the Oxford, you'd be impressed. You know, whether you wanted to or not, it would have that much influence upon you, you know, just simply because they use that word. So yeah, it totally deceives right from the very beginning. I think they had the American capacity analysis for a while, but I think they've dropped that completely, and I think they used the Oxford in America as well. So
it's just so much more impressive sounding.
Ooh, well, come on.
And then what they do is they want you to, once you've taken this test and once they've gotten you to sign up for the course, of course they want you to read Dianetics, which is where it all begins. Oh, yes. And
yeah, that's what they call book one, yeah.
Yes, and you know, I told you I have a funny story about Dianetics. I'll tell it to you now.
Oh, do, please.
So I went through a rather prolonged phase in my life where I was really hippy-dippy, new agey type person, and I just was looking, you know, I was willing to buy into anything, and I remember seeing a commercial for Dianetics on TV. And I was at a garage sale of all things one day, and there was a box full of used books, and that's usually where I'm drawn to. And I was digging through this box of books, and lo and behold, there was a Dianetics paperback in the box. And I thought, well, the box said 50 cents per book. That I can afford. I will grab this. And I took it to the gentleman who was running this rummage sale, and he looked down at the book and he said, oh, I don't know how that got in there. He said, I couldn't possibly live with myself if I even took 2 quarters from you for that book. He said, if you really want it, just take it. So, you know, I thought, well, okay, I'll take it, you know. And I took it home and I flipped it open, and right on the inside cover, it just in big letters scrawled was the word crap. So, you know, once again, this should have been a red flag for me, but I decided to, you know, read a little bit of it. And one thing that I noticed is that the book, inside the book, there's a synopsis, and it starts with these words: the creation of Dianetics is a milestone for man, comparable to his discovery of fire and superior to his inventions of the wheel and the arch. So we're starting off with some pretty big claims about Dianetics. Dianetics here. But
oh, yes.
I can tell you that I never got all the way through the book because I found it boring, and I couldn't force myself to get all the way through it. But it's a book that has managed to influence a lot of people. So when you start in book 1, Dianetics, at this point, do you necessarily know that you are entering into the Church of Scientology, or is it still sort of promoted as like a self-help situation?
No, you've hit the nail on the head. I'd read the book, actually, before I went along to the place. So I had some idea of what I believed. And it was promoted as self-help. They didn't hide the fact that it was in some way associated with Scientology, but they didn't push the Scientology side of it. They really gave you the impression that it was completely separate and nothing to do with it. Whereas in later publications, they say that, well, without Dianetics, there wouldn't be Scientology, and Dianetics laid the foundation for what came along afterwards. The truth is, I mean, and it's as simple as a financial problem once again. In, I think, 1953, L. Ron Hubbard lost control of Dianetics. He was declared bankrupt. So Scientology was devised to simply continue what he'd had a taste of, which was financial success and adulation from the hordes of followers, and to do it tax-free, or at least trying to be tax-free, and also introducing for the first time the religious side of things, which is when it gets really interesting. There's a 1954 edition of a book called The Creation of Human Ability, which, again, we're onto this whole thing about, creating, enhancing a person's ability. And on page 151 of that edition of the book, it states quite clearly, Scientology is neither a psychotherapy nor a religion, which I love because he'd already started the whole religion side. There's a fantastic, now I can't remember where I read this, but I'm sure it can be found easily enough if a person does a bit of research using Google. There was a meeting of Hubbard and lawyers to decide the best way of introducing Scientology as a religion. And they sat down and they worked out the best way to do it. So it was purely a business decision. Strangely enough, going back 4 years to when, just before Dianetics was published, he had a similar meeting with some people who went through the book to make sure there weren't too many Freudian references in it, because it's actually ripped off from Freud's abreaction therapy. Plus also, Count Alfred Kobinsky's General Semantics, and basically some hypnotism. So you've essentially got, there's also another influence in the book as well. It's something called Utilitarianism. I don't know if you've come across that one before. I think some Methodist preacher in Yorkshire came up with that. I forget the guy's name right now. But what it simply means is that if you have to make a choice, you decide, well, is it going to help more people than it's going to harm? So you've got that idea, which again is in the book. So right away, you've got this book, which Hubbard claims is great discovery, but essentially it's other people's ideas ripped off, to put it simply. And you'll find that even Scientology follows that same line. All the ideas in Scientology are found somewhere else. Even the names found somewhere else. Although we might give a bit of credit and say, okay, you came up with the name Scientology. We keep that one, But yeah, you can be quite angry and bitter about the whole thing. I've reached a point now where I see the humor in it. And I see it like, how could anyone be taken in by this? But it took me 5 years to get to this point. 5 years of solid research and 5 years of feeling angry. At being hoodwinked and being lied to, because like the aims of Scientology, as John Travolta says in the Going Clear movie, are a civilization without criminality, without insanity, and without war. The funny thing is they actually believe they can do that. There's no evidence to show that they could do anything like that, but they believe they can. And as ideals go, they are fantastic ideals to have. So you align yourself with those ideals you go along with it. And basically, Scientologists then, because they're going along with those ideals, they consider that if you're opposing them, then you're opposing those ideals, and you're a really evil person. So again, you get into like critics of Scientology. They don't listen to them because how could you oppose those ideals? They would be so terribly wrong. Those ideals would align with any religion. So again, you get into the whole area. Is it a religion? Well, we might cover that one if we get a chance.
Yeah. In fact, I remember back when I was trying to read Dianetics. Once I really started to understand that this was definitely linked to Scientology, I tried to do some research about it. And I looked it up, and at the time, they were very bold or very blatant in stating that you could be of any faith system and still be a Scientologist. It didn't negate your existing faith system. Now, just this morning, because I was thinking about that, I went onto their website and I started trying to search the website. That language isn't there anymore, and I'm guessing that is because they kind of probably decided that if they're going to be this big tax-exempt religion, they cannot very well say that you can be any religion and still be part of our religion.
Okay, that's an interesting one, Natalina, because I actually believe they do still say that, and I've heard them say it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I've heard recently somebody on I forget exactly, but it was some media outlet saying, "Oh no, you can be a Scientologist and a member of any other religion. We don't contradict any other beliefs. Scientology is simply the study of knowledge, and it enhances other religions." They say the truth is absolutely the opposite, as you can probably imagine. And I'll tell you exactly how and when you find out. When you do introductory courses, that's one thing. When you start to do major courses, which is a whole new level, you get given something to read called the Student's Guide to Acceptable Behavior. And one of the items, like make sure you get enough to eat and enough to sleep, it says, do not mix Scientology with other practices. And it does not specify what those other practices might be. I think they hint at things like yoga. Basically, that's where they say, oh no, you can believe what you like, but you cannot practice any of these other things, anything that you would consider other practices, which simply takes out every other religion. So,
right. Yeah.
They're hoping that by that time, sorry about that.
That's okay.
They're hoping that by that time, you've had what they refer to as a cognition, which is really a form of enlightenment. And the cognition that you supposedly get, first of all, in Dianetics or Scientology is along the lines of, oh my gosh, this stuff works. Okay?
Right.
And you go further in from that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I presume that anyone who really, makes the effort to get involved in the pursuit of Scientology, even as you're coming through the door, it seems to me that you would have to be the type of person who is a seeker anyway. So you're probably not firmly grounded in any other faith system, because you're seeking something other. And I imagine that most people who are professing Scientologists, particularly the very devout, they are idealists because they want to save the planet. Is that where the clear the planet phrase comes from?
Exactly. You may recall from your reading of Dianetics that the reason they claim to solve all men's problems is because apparently there's this unknown part of the mind called the reactive mind. This is one of the things that they changed over from Freud's terminology. Freud called it the subconscious, okay?
Yes.
And it's exactly the same thing, except they call it the reactive mind, therefore Hubbard discovered it. He discovered the word reactive, he didn't discover the unconscious mind. I'm not even sure, do we have an unconscious mind? We may do, I don't know. But the claim in Dianetics is quite simple, that all moments of pain, unconsciousness, trauma, upset, negative emotion are stored in the reactive mind, not our normal mind, which is why when we're having a normal, just going through life, everything's fine. But if something triggers something that's in our reactive mind, it can influence what we're doing. So a classic example would be if I'd been attacked by a dog as a child, forgotten all about it, and then I saw a dog and began to feel a little uncomfortable. And so that's how they say the reactive mind works. And if that's true, then almost anything could be triggered and cause a person to react in a way that wasn't ideal. So
even
that's
their
what they
very
say.
birth. I remember that from Dianetics.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. They talk about birth, and then they talk about being in the womb, and then they even go further back and start saying that in Dianetics, scientific research has proven that people have lived before. Mm-hmm. So really, is that scientific? Well, how did you find that out? Well, we asked some people. And what did they say? They said they'd lived before. Okay, well, that's proof. That's scientific proof. Sure.
Sounds logical.
Oh, it's incredible. I was reading one earlier where someone was talking about having, they were riding their chariot out to a picnic in ancient Greece or Rome, and the chariot broke down. And I thought, okay, that's hilarious. And I read a little bit further, and it didn't actually break down. What happened was the chariot wheel went over a rock and came off. And I'm thinking, like, hang on, how many, including Western movies where there's a stagecoach that goes over a rock and the wheel comes off? So is it a memory that someone can recall from a previous? Is it something they just made up? We don't know. And it doesn't really matter. But it does matter to a Scientologist because they believe it's a past life memory. But let's not go down that particular one just yet. Let's just finish off with the whole concept of clearing. So you have this reactive mind, which, when you do Dianetics, is full up until the point of birth and possibly conception, without even going into the past life thing. That's what Scientology does. And if you clear all that, all memories of unconsciousness, hospital operations, you name it, anything like that, you clear all that out of yourself, and the aim is to clear the planet, which will be every single person no longer influenced by their own reactive mind. So that's basically what that means. And people thought, wow, wouldn't that be great if everyone was clear and everyone was rational and sane and normal and wonderful? Yeah, that'd be good. But
right.
Of course, it is only a goal, and it's very a goal that they dangle in front of people, and they use it to extract money for more courses and sell more books and sell more Hubbard lectures. And I don't know if you've ever listened to any Hubbard lectures. That's entertainment. Oh my God, it is.
I just recently was trying to take some Hubbard in just to familiarize myself, and he has this, I think, as with all cult leaders, he has this charisma a little bit, but he's so, especially in the interviews where you can see him speaking, he just, I guess maybe it's with the benefit of the knowledge that we have, but it's almost like he's just constantly got this smirk on his face, like he knows he's giving you a line. You know what I mean? Like he knows it's very bizarre.
That's right. And it's fascinating that you should pick up on that. Now, we've talked about this clearing of people. Now, I'm not too sure of the exact number, but I think he claims in the Dianetics book to have cleared something like 270-something people. He doesn't name them. He doesn't tell you where they are, how you can find them. But there's meant to be all these clears wandering around. This book was published in 1950. Now, there is a lecture from him in 1958 where he's standing in front of a row of flags and he's smiling at the audience and he says, I have a confession to make. And, of course, they're all thinking, oh, God, what can it be? And he actually says, I didn't make any clears back then. So Hubbard, in his 1958 lecture, I think it was called the Clearing Congress, admits that he didn't make any clears during the Dianetics phase, which is amazing because he claims to have made a couple of hundred at least. And then the interesting thing is then because he then goes on to say, I didn't make them then, but I can make them now. The interesting thing is, in 1966, which is a further 8 years on, they announced the first clear. So I'm thinking, hang on a second. Whoa. In 1950, you claimed to be able to make these clears. You described the state of clear, which was a person with perfect recall, no illnesses, no colds, no need to wear glasses. I mean, the list goes on. all illnesses are pretty much psychosomatic, and if they're psychosomatic, then Dianetics can cure them. And yet here's the first clear 16 years after the publication of Dianetics. So again, there was a lot of strange stuff going on. He seemed able to simply, you know that whole thing that if you make the lie big enough, no one's going to notice? It's a bit like that. He got away with a lot, right. as you know, if you've heard any of his lectures.
Yeah, he just kind of made these grand proclamations that sounded plausible because he delivered them in such a way that they, you know, he delivered that just as matter of fact, and so people just bought it. So
that's right.
When he said, then finally, basically it's a bold-faced lie on if we're looking at it honestly. But when he finally said, okay, so now we have this clear person, what exactly does that mean? Like, what is the process of becoming what they call clear?
Well, it means that you no longer have your own reactive mind, which is kind of interesting phraseology, because it means that you might have somebody else's. And guess what? As you get into Scientology, you find out that you do. It's not, you've got rid of your own reactive mind, but you've now got the reactive minds of all these dead aliens from millions of years ago. So, you know, it's like, I feel so sorry for these people that have to discover all this, because I didn't know anything about that when I was in. Of course, they don't tell you. They keep that quiet, you know.
Sure.
The secret levels of Scientology are what you attain to and what you hope one day that you'll be able to afford and achieve those levels. If you were told what they were, as people now are, you just wouldn't join. You would not, you know.
Right. What happens, you know, let's, this is going a little bit off course here, but what happens, like, let's say I am in the beginning levels of Scientology and I'm seeking to become a Scientologist and I'm working my way toward clear. Let's say I'm on the internet one day and I happen upon a website, of which there are many, that divulges all of these secrets about what these upper levels of Scientology reveal, which we can get into in a little bit. But what if I am now, as a Scientologist, exposed to that? How do they deter people from taking that information in? Is there a way that they kind of scare people into not?
Oh, yes, yeah. I mean, it's not changed since my day. Like when I was in, there was a BBC TV show about to go out and we were told not to watch it. Russell Miller's book, Barefaced Messiah, came out and we were told not to read it under any circumstances, and they still do that. Now, obviously, if you tell a person not to read something, they're going to want to read it. So the Scientologists throw another little curve in there by saying they have what they call theta and n theta. Theta's good and n theta's bad, okay? You need more and more theta and less n theta. And theta simply means the soul or the spirit. So again, this is how they tie it into religion. And you need more and more and more theta and absolutely no n theta. You're not allowed any n theta in your life. And of course, if they label a TV show like Going Clear as n theta, then you're not going to watch it because it will ruin your Scientology progress. So that's how they do it. In fact, I've actually heard people say, with regards Going Clear, yes, I've heard about this, and I'll be sure not to watch it. So, I mean,
I think John Travolta said
that's what you have. I think he did. He was another one, yeah. And that's what they're like. They won't subject themselves to n theta. Now, you can change the word n theta for bad news. You know, if you went through your life and cut out all the bad news, you'd have a wonderful life. It wouldn't be very realistic because you'd be missing out on all, you know, it's unrealistic. It's like an ostrich with its head in the sand, quite simply. If you want to live your life and cut out all the bad news, well, you could do that, and you'd probably have a happier life, but it wouldn't bear any resemblance to reality, I don't think.
Right. What I want to ask you is, I want to talk about the specific process, and we don't have to get into a ton of detail, but, you know, everyone's heard about these e-meters that are used, and this is during the auditing process, which I imagine starts probably right away. when you get into Scientology. So what is that process? I mean, what are they trying to achieve, and what does the e-meter supposedly do?
Well, it sends a small current around your body, or rather through your body and supposedly through your mind. And if you're holding onto the e-meter cans and somebody asks a question and they get a certain type of reaction on the needle of the e-meter, it's meant to show mental mass. So, for example, if you're asked a question about, I don't know, your mum or your dad, and you get some needle reaction, then they'll pry into that area to find out what caused the needle reaction. And then you'll reach a point in talking about it where the needle starts to float quite freely, and they will say to you, your needle's floating, which in Scientologies means that problem solved now. It's okay. That mental mass has gone. So you're trying to get rid of mental mass, which again is this stuff that you're trying to clear yourself of. Does that make sense?
Yes. Is this what they're calling thetans?
No, this is engrams.
Oh, this is engrams.
We haven't reached the body thetans at this stage.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. You're still trying to get rid of your own reactive mind at this stage.
Got it. Okay. And engrams is a word that I recall from Dianetics. And wouldn't you know, the word engram was mentioned way before Dianetics in his science fiction books.
That's right, yeah. It's almost as though his science fiction writing and the religion he developed, it's almost like one morphed out of the other to some degree. But he was playing around with these words. Now, I'm not sure whether Freud actually had a word for an incident in your mind that contained pain and unconsciousness. But even before he called them engrams, he had another name for them. I forget exactly what it was, but it was another name. And they decided to call them engrams because en meaning against something. I think, I'm not too sure of what the Greek derivation of en is, but they use it in, we talked about theta and en theta, which is like negative. It's like a negative thing. So a gram being a picture, it would be like a negative picture in your mind. Okay. So that's where it came from. But yeah, he was toying around with these ideas for quite some time, and in much the same way, like amateur psychologist, I suppose. But it all came together with his book, and people bought into the idea. They bought into the idea that you could clear each other quite cheaply, and everybody wanted to be clear. And why not? Because it sounds fantastic. Yeah. The reality is there's no such thing as a clear. There's absolutely no such thing. It's pie in the sky, It's nonsense. It's nonsense.
Yeah. And although he borrowed all of this terminology from psychotherapists and stuff, L. Ron Hubbard was adamant that this was not psychology. In fact, Scientology in general is adamantly opposed to the entire industry of psychiatry.
Yeah, and superior to it as well, because Hubbard has the answers to the mind, and psychiatry and psychology are just groping in the dark, according to them. So definitely.
Right. So let's stay on Hubbard for a minute, and I know we're kind of jumping around a little bit, but I'm so fascinated by just the whole way that he managed to keep this thing going, even in the face of, we hear so much against Scientology now, but as I mentioned in the introduction, it's not new. There was opposition to Scientology pretty much from the beginning. So
absolutely, yeah. Can I just say that the man who wrote the introduction to Dianetics, Dr. Joseph A. Winter, was also the first critic. The book was published in May, and in August, Dr. Winter was critical of Hubbard. It didn't take long, because I think when you're right up with someone and in the proximity, you can see right through them if they're a charlatan in any way, shape, or form. Yeah. It becomes obvious. And you can fool. I think, was it Churchill who said you can fool some of the people some of the time, but you can't fool all the people all the time. And that's essentially, basically what it was. There's a wonderful site. I think it's the chronology of publications against. Let's have a look. I have it here. Okay, the actual address is scientology.neocities.org, and it's a chronology of publications in order of anti-Scientology publications, including Scientology publications. Anything on the subject, it's got everything from 1950 to the present day, and it's a wonderful chronology of publications on Scientology is what it's called.
I'll put
that
link
starts
in.
Off, oh, please do, yeah. And it actually starts off in 1934 with Dr. Anastasius Nordenholt's book on Scientology, which, funnily enough, had similar aims to Scientology. Did he get it from there? I don't know. But it includes books, 144 books, 99 reports and journals, 194 articles and essays, and also 51 non-English publications, and that goes right up to the present day and includes all the recent books. So it's a wonderful, wonderful resource. And as I said right at the very beginning, people were publishing articles which, of course, Hubbard didn't like. Anything critical he didn't like, which is why he came up with this idea later on that if someone was critical of you, it meant that they'd done something harmful to you. Aha!
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And would we call that a suppressive person?
Oh, yes. Yeah. A person who's critical of Scientology is a suppressive person. Jerry Armstrong, who is a critic who has done some great work in making sure that Hubbard's secret writings were made public, he says that a true suppressive person simply tells the truth about L. Ron Hubbard and Scientology. So that's a different definition to Hubbard's definition, but
sure.
It's the one I certainly go along with.
Absolutely. And in fact, the Scientologists would go so far as to say that suppressive persons or anyone who is critical of Scientology is inherently a criminal.
Oh, yes.
And all you have to do is figure out what their crime is.
That's right, yeah, which is why a number of years ago, especially when people first began to walk around with phones filming everything, you'd get Scientologists repeatedly saying, "What are your crimes? What are your crimes? What are your crimes?" Convinced that the person would have crimes. And of course, people don't. Or if they do, they stole an apple or they've got a parking ticket. Or, people do not walk around with, normally anyway, with major crimes, The interesting thing is that a lot of Scientologists do have crimes. And I think if you go searching, I think once again I found a site there, Scientologists' crimes, and it's quite scary. I mean, do we want to talk about whether Charles Manson was a Scientologist, whether the son of Sam murderer was a Scientologist? I don't know. Should we go down that road?
My goodness. Touch on that a little bit. Now, that's something I had not heard.
Oh, right. Okay. It's all very, very tenuous. And the simple reason is because Scientology some time ago had a thing called Operation Snow White, which was completely removing any negative references to Scientology. This was done in government offices, but of course it's also been done in Scientology places. And certainly I've spoken to people who claim that all mention of people like Charles Manson and son of Sam were absolutely removed from the organization, so there would not be a paper trail. So there's no evidence. It's just becomes hearsay, even though, someone, well, I can remember reading this. It's still hearsay, so, yeah. But that's Scientology.
Right.
You see, worse than the crime is that it might impact negatively on Scientology. And this might be a good time to mention this. So I know of a specific instance where a young boy was left home alone while his mom worked in the local organization, and there was a house fire, and this poor child lost his life. And that in itself is absolutely terrible. The reason the boy was alone was because his mother felt that it was more important to be down at the Scientology organization, devoting herself to clearing the planet. What did they do? They flew in the bigwigs from Los Angeles to make sure everyone got their story straight. And I feel sick even talking about this. The fact that these people would have no compassion whatsoever for the child, no compassion for the family, but they were solely concerned with protecting the good name, supposedly, of Scientology. And that's just one case. I could think of like 20 off the top of my head all over the world where this has been done. Where Scientology neglect or Scientology practices have resulted in the death of someone, often a child, and their first reaction was to cover up. So that, I mean, I feel ill just talking about this because it's absolutely horrible. They do it to this day.
Yeah, in fact, I had written, this is my Scientology encounter number 2. I've been operating my website since about 2009, and I had written a few different articles about Scientology, not necessarily about what Scientology is, but different things that Scientology has been involved in. The first article I wrote was talking about the Panorama, the BBC Panorama documentary, which was so riveting.
Yes. Yeah.
I wrote about that, and then I wrote about some crimes that took place on their big ship. I can't remember the name of it. The Freewinds?
Freewinds.
Yes.
Freewinds, yeah.
Yeah, and people, just horrors that people have gone through on that ship. And what ended up happening is I got an email from the Church of Scientology. It wasn't a particular, it wasn't a legal document, but it was a polite cease and desist email.
Wow.
Which I, replied, no thank you, and proceeded to write another article about Scientology, and they never bothered me again. I guess I was small potatoes. But
good for you. But that's exactly how they've been able to maintain their existence over the last 64 years by basically threatening people into silence, by keeping their own members in check and denying them information that they really need, and they obviously try to do it with you. Right. Okay, if we shut this person up, that's the end of that,
Right.
So
and it makes me wonder, is there a team of Scientologists that their job is just to Google Scientology and just attack people?
Yeah, it used to be called the Guardian's Office. It's now called the Office of Special Affairs. They claim that the Guardian's Office was closed down and replaced by the Office of Special Affairs, but actually some of the same people work in that organisation too. 11 members, I think it was 11 or 9 or something, were sent to jail for the Operation Snow White that I mentioned, where we had the largest infiltration of US government offices, and they simply went in there to remove anything negative about Hubbard or Scientology. So it wasn't the fact that, if there's no evidence, then it didn't happen. And that's what they go on, so that's what they try to do.
Right.
There was the terrible, what happened to Paulette Cooper, which I believe is the subject of Tony Ortega's new book, which will be out, The Unbreakable Miss Lovely. They tried to frame her. The stuff that Scientology has done, I mean, whoa. Every new religion has teething troubles, for sure. This is not a religion. This is a crime syndicate whose only purpose is to make money, masquerading as a religion, and something needs to be done about it. So that's the bottom line.
I fully agree with you. And while we're on the topic of just these horrific crimes of Scientology, would you mind speaking a bit about Lisa McPherson?
Lisa was a Scientologist. She supposedly achieved the state of clear, so obviously she didn't have her own reactive mind anymore. It's very easy to get the facts from simply by putting in a Google search for her name. But she basically ran into some problems. She had a minor car accident, and she was taken to a psychiatric hospital, which you're not allowed to do as a Scientologist. Psychiatry is the enemy. And some Scientologists went and removed her from there. She initially didn't want to go with them, My personal view is that the reason that she, like she had the minor car accident, she took off her clothes, and that drew the attention of the authorities, and that's why she was taken to the psychiatric hospital. I actually believe she did that on purpose, so that she would be incarcerated and committed, to be freed from Scientology's influence. Mm. Unfortunately for her, it didn't work. They went to get her, and she eventually agreed to go with them, which was the big mistake. 14 days later, Lisa was dead. She was dehydrated. Her initial death certificate said that dehydration was the cause of death. They basically twisted the arm of the coroner, and they got her to change that. And really, it was, again, it's as I said to you before, it's not so much, it's awful that such a thing could happen. It's the fact that they tried to cover it up.
Right.
And Mark Rathbun, who was number 2 and was very responsible for the dealing with this case, he actually has said in a court of law that it cost them $30 million to make the case go away.
Wow. Which,
again, is scary, because it means that if you've got $30 million, you can get away with murder. Right. Because there's no question about it. Lisa lost her life whilst under the care of Scientology. So.
Yeah, it's so tragic. And it's always
horrible.
As you mentioned at the beginning, it always with Scientology comes back to money. They need to make the money. They need to be this giant conglomerate, this giant organization. And part of that reason is to fund these cover-ups that they have to constantly involve themselves in. And what that kind of goes to is the point of their constant quest to protect their tax-exempt status as a church, as a religious organization. And that kind of is the real tragedy of it, because by being declared a church, they're able to get away with so much more.
Yeah.
I
couldn't agree more with you. In fact, there was a recent court case where the judge basically simply said, look, they're a religion, I can't intervene. And again, it always comes back to that. From a Scientology viewpoint, if the members do hear about any of this stuff, the Scientologists then turn that and say, oh, well, that's an example of SPs attacking us. We need more money for our war chest to fight these people, because if they stop us, there's no hope for mankind. We're the only hope mankind's got. These people are attacking us with all these terrible stories about all these things that we're supposedly doing, and you obviously wouldn't think we would do stuff like that, would you? So give us more money, give us more money. And that's exactly what goes on. It's a self-perpetuating scam, and it is utterly, utterly evil, in my opinion.
I absolutely agree. Is it true that you cannot read the book or watch the film Going Clear in the UK?
I believe so, yeah. I believe they pulled out some old libel law that refers to Northern Ireland, and that's what they've done. However, all is not lost. I believe you could get the book through a number of different resources, and you can watch the movie through a number of different sites. So, although they've actually tried to suppress it, as they've tried to suppress every other publication, including John Dignan's book, The Complex, Russell Miller's book, the list goes on. They try to suppress everything. Mm-hmm. It would be awful if they got any power at all, because it would be just, I mean, if you think you've seen the worst of police states, a Scientology state, oh my God, forget it, Scary.
Let's stay on that topic for a minute, and then I want to go back and talk about what prompted you not only to get out of Scientology, but then what ended up motivating you to take it on as a cause. But since we're on the topic of the sort of police state type militaristic way in which, and it really is militaristic, right down to the fact that they've got their own pseudo navy through the Sea Org. Let's talk a little bit about, because I think this is really important, about what happens when you are a Scientologist and you, let's call it misbehave. What happens? How do they rehabilitate you?
Yeah, well, and we touched on this earlier when you were asking about what would happen if someone did see something on TV. Well, they have a person called the ethics officer, and in the Sea Organization, it's called Master at Arms. But basically, this is the person that keeps you on the straight and narrow. And this person has the ultimate power to tell you who you can talk to, who you can't talk to, what books you can and can't read. They leave it under no uncertain terms, you know. Right. So if you're married to someone who isn't a Scientologist and they are reading this stuff, you will be asked to disconnect from them, which simply means have nothing more to do with them at all. They deny this happens, but of course it's happening to people on a daily basis, and they publish the note where it says this just to prove that they're lying again. So yeah, it is absolutely awful, but it's the ethics officer or the master at arms that would deal with this. And again, we're talking about the OSA, the Office of Special Affairs. They involve themselves in all this as well, you know, to keep the good name of Scientology pure and clean. And, right. You know.
And then there's an actual facility, probably more than one, that actually, if you are, for whatever reason, it is determined that you need quote-unquote rehabilitation, that they will send you to these places, and the conditions are just horrific. It escapes my mind what these places are called, or what that...
Rehabilitation Project Force, or the RPF. Now, the interesting thing is a public Scientologist and a staff member of an ordinary Scientology organization would not normally be subject to this kind of discipline. You would have to be in the Sea organization to submit to this. And you could be at your desk one day and two guys would simply walk in and say, come with us, and that would be the end of you. You know, you would be marched away. In Nancy Maney's case, she was locked in the garage at the Fort Harrison Hotel in Clearwater with all those exhaust fumes, and she was pregnant. I mean, it doesn't even bear thinking about, does it? At the Gold Base at Hemet, they have an area which they call the Hole. That's the nickname. And that contains the Scientology executives that were in charge of the whole organization. So even they've not been immune to anything. As an ordinary public, you would not come across any of this, but you would be put under pressure. But the closer you get to the top, the worse the pressure becomes. When I was a staff member, I was actually sent down to the headquarters in England, and they couldn't put me on the RPF, but they did try to subject me to some of that kind of discipline. And I was put into a huge basement that was full of moulding books and papers. I'm simply told to move a big pile of this stuff from one area to another. And I said, what's the point of that? And I was just like glared at and said, are you refusing to do this? And I said, well, no, I'm not refusing to do it, but what's the whole point? You have to do it because I'm telling you to do it. And I said, well, I'm not going to do it wearing my good suit. Do you have any overalls I could wear? Mm-hmm. So I gave in because I realized, hang on a second. I don't want to leave Scientology at this point, because you actually start to believe that Scientology is where your future is and where your eternity is and where your salvation is and where your family future is. So it becomes this thing that you can't let go of. So when somebody in a higher position with more authority tells you to do something, you just do it simply for that reason. Right. And that's where I was at, so they got me some overalls and I covered my suit up and I began to move this pile of moldy crap from one side of the cellar to the other. And it didn't go on for too long. I think I did 2 days of that, And this was because I'd committed some kind of like small misdemeanor, which leads into why I left. Yes. I actually ended up being kicked out, which was great. I left the organization I was at without authority. So I was declared a suppressive person for doing that. Because you can't just leave. You got to leave a specific way. By going through all these different steps. Each step is designed to get you back into the organization. So I got as far as I could, and I think I completed about 4 of 7 steps or something, and they wouldn't allow me to go on to the next step. And I thought, the only way I'm going to leave here is if I just like walk out of here. So I did. And the simple reason why did I do that was because my wife and myself, we had a child and she was pregnant and we were starving. Okay. That's what made us leave. Now, an interesting little aside, my ex-wife, she was also on staff. She was a supervisor, and she got called in one day and told, you can no longer work here because you used to be a psychiatric nurse. And just like that, she was off staff. She was out of there. Wow. So any staff pay we were getting, which was like so little, it was a joke. That was gone. So we no longer had that. And I just simply thought, well, you know something, if she's not on staff, I don't want to be on staff anymore. So we left, and I got declared a suppressive person for doing that. I still believed in Scientology, and I still thought that Scientology was this wonderful subject that was going to save mankind from all its ills, and, you know, I believed all the hype. So I applied to open up my own Scientology mission, which was like a smaller version of an organization. And I was given the okay to do that, and I did, and I ran that for the next 4 years. Now, I did a good job, I hate to say, at running the Scientology mission, and I had to organize an event in a hotel for Scientologists from the area, and I did this. And what happened was everyone showed up for the event, which was a fundraiser, and everyone had a meal, and then at the end of the night I was presented with the bill. Now, what I hadn't done was sell tickets, because I trusted these people, because Scientologists consider themselves the most ethical people on earth. So I thought, well, it'd be easy just to go around and collect the money from them to pay for the meal that I've just arranged for them in this hotel. And what happened was I found out that 70% of them came up with the story, oh, do you mind if we give you that next week? Do you mind if I send that to you? And I started to get this sinking feeling that, uh-oh, because I think the bill for the hotel and the meal and everything, I think it was about £2,000 at the time, wow, which was quite a lot of money. It might have been slightly less than that, but it was certainly around that number. And there was a couple of hundred people eating this dinner, and I think, you know, if they all paid what they were supposed to pay, then I would have the whole bill covered, because obviously I'd set up that it would be that way. If I was to do that now, I would make sure that nobody sat down at 8 who hadn't paid. But of course, I trusted these people, you know, they were my friends. So I ended up with a bill that I couldn't pay. I think I collected about 300 or 400 of the bill. That actually made me pause and think, what am I doing? I can't trust these people. You know, I've now got this debt for whatever. They've had their event. They've taken whatever they wanted to from their members. I'm left with this bill, and the hotel was in my hometown, so, you know, I knew the hotelier, so there was a big problem there because it was a friend of mine, or at least, you know, a working associate, close, you know, an acquaintance, let's say. So I had that problem. And really because of that, it took away my enthusiasm for the subject. Now, what you have to do in Scientology is report your statistics every week. And in my case, it was like, how many new people have I got in? How many books have I sold? How many hours of auditing? How many course completions? All that kind of a thing. And because of what happened at this dinner, I just didn't want to introduce anyone to Scientology anymore. I thought, you know something? Even though I still think Scientology is the most wonderful thing in the world, it's really going to be terrible to introduce them to these people who are going to take all the money off them, because I knew that's what went on. You know, I knew they took money. But at the time, I thought it was for a good cause. So I stopped doing anything in the mission that I was running. And when it came time to phone in the weekly statistics, I just simply said, I'm really sorry, I've not had a chance to do anything this week. I've done nothing. I'm really, really sorry, but I've done nothing. And that went on for 6 weeks. And at the end of the 6 weeks, I got a visit from somebody from the Sea organization who was running the missions network, who simply said, "You are out of here. The mission is taken off you. I'm giving it to somebody else to run. But as far as we're concerned, you are finished." Wow. So that was how I got out. And I was glad. The sense of relief was just amazing. You know, as I said, okay, that means that all these debts that have been incurred, that's off my plate, because there was no way. I mean, I think at the time we had 4 children by that time, and even just putting food on the table was tough enough without having Scientology added onto that as a problem, you know. So that's basically what happened, and that was in 1994. Roll the clock forward 14 years to 2008. Some of my children are grown up by that time. My wife and I have gone our separate ways, and I spotted online that some people were going to protest Scientology, and I thought, oh God, that's terrible. How could you do that? You know, Scientology is this wonderful, beneficial organization solving the problems of the world, solving the problems of drug addiction and criminality and so on. And I spoke to somebody who was going to the protest, and they just looked at me like I was mad and said, you need to do some research. And fortunately, you know, with the 14-year interlude, I felt comfortable enough to actually begin to look at Scientology online. And there began a process that's got me here today. At first, I was very afraid. Oh, I was terrified because I knew that it was wrong to do this. But eventually I started, oh, that's what happened to such a body. Oh, look, that's what happened to this one. And oh, look, that's what they've been saying all these years that supposedly was negative. And just gradually over a period of, initially about 6 months, I think it took to discover once and for all that it was a con and that I'd been conned. And even though I'd done no Scientology in 14 years, I still held the mindset, and I still considered that I'd go back to it one day. And then suddenly that world came tumbling down. Oh my. Yeah. L. Ron Hubbard was just a liar. I can't believe this. I was horrified. Then I got angry. Eventually, I think about 15 months later, I plucked up the courage to go along to my first ever protest. And again, I was terrified because I knew that they'd look out the window and see me, and they'd contact the organization in England and say, who is this guy? And funnily enough, like I think about my second or third protest, I saw one of them look out the window, stare directly at me, and I saw his lips move. Yes, that's him.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. They would photograph you. They would film you. They would record. Well, I assume they would record. And all that information would be sent to the headquarters in England. Again, you're not allowed to do that. You know, that's sharing information on people. And who are these people? They're not the police. They're not a government spy organization. They're a private group, you know, that spies on individuals and uses the information against them, hopefully. So I got myself into something. I'll tell you. And here's the other interesting thing. Before I went to my first protest, I actually had to really sit down and think, if I go up against these people, I'm going up a multi-billion-dollar international crime syndicate that really has no regard for people who oppose it. I'm likely to be called every name under the sun. I'm likely to possibly, I don't know how, you know, how is my life in danger? I don't know. What's the worst they could do to me? And I sat and I thought about it. Well, do you know what's more important? What's more important to me is that the truth about this organization is told so that other people do not get suckered in and get conned out of, let's be honest, finances is just a small part of it. You could lose your family if they turn against you because, you know, you're reading books about it. So I had to sit and think about this. And I thought, well, the worst thing they could do is kill me. Let's be honest. Now, there's no evidence that Scientology has ever killed anybody, but there is some murky stuff. Right. No evidence, though, right? No evidence. What's the worst thing they could do than that? yeah, they could target my family and go after them. That would be absolutely awful. Mm-hmm. And then it kind of gets easier from there. You know, the worst thing they could probably do is call me a paedophile. That's the worst I could come up with. Mm-hmm. So I thought, well, let's assume that they're not going to target my family or me, and the worst they can do is call me a paedophile. Is that worth going against them and trying to expose them for what they actually are, keeping in mind that the members that I'll be, protesting in front of don't even realize that they're being conned and lied to? So it could be a difficult job. I just thought, okay, that's it. I'm going to do this thing because I can't live with myself. My conscience won't let me live with myself and Scientology continue to hoodwink and deceive and trap and trick people. So that's basically what influenced me, if you like, what powers me to this day. And funnily enough, when I organised my first protest in Dublin in 2012, they did insinuate that I was a paedophile. So all that came to fruition.
My word.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I still. The interesting thing is that once they point the finger and call you something, a little bit of it sticks to you. You can't get away from that. There's a court case going on right now where they've accused me of assault, which I did not do. But the fact that they've accused me of assault, every time it gets a mention in the media, they mention that I'm accused of an alleged assault. Now obviously when it comes to court, if justice is done, they will say, no, this man did not assault anybody, but it's already on the records that I'm accused of an alleged assault. So again, they get what they want that way, and they hope that people will shut up when this kind of thing happens to you, but it's not going to work. They've picked on the wrong guy.
Well, and I can't imagine, the things that I get accused of are on such a small scale compared to that. And I can't imagine, you're so strong and you're so idealistic about this, but I imagine that it chips away at you. I was looking, after I saw Going Clear, and this is, I have pretty good understanding of things that Scientology had done. As I said, I wrote about it a bit. But when I saw Going Clear, I just wanted to learn a little bit more. So I was Googling it. And of course, Scientology has purchased ad space on Google so that the first search result that comes up is their Freedom magazine, where they try to destroy the reputations of everybody involved in that film. And I'm looking at it right now, and it's the same kind of thing. You just go down the line, and here on this thing, it's Mike Rinder, the wife beater, Marty Rathman, guru in handcuffs, Sarah Goldberg, the home wrecker. And it just goes on, and then it's...
They do exactly the same thing here. I organised a conference in February in Dublin. We called it Enough is Enough. And just prior to the conference, they sent out a press release attacking people who were going to be at the conference speaking. What was quite funny is they got 3 or 4 people on there that weren't even at the conference. But I found that really funny. But it was that same approach. It was that same kind of thing.
Right.
And here's the thing, I watched Going Clear. I think I've seen it twice up to now. Mm-hmm. And what amazed me was the number of people who were scared and found it scary and terrifying. And it made me stop and think, well, hang on a minute. I actually didn't find it that scary. Is it because I'm so used to this? Is it because I'm to some degree immune to it? And then I saw the Marty Rathbun Dangerous Persuasion show that was on, I think, about 2 weeks after the Going Clear. I was actually scared watching it. I did find it scary because you are up against a scary organisation. They will try to destroy your life, and they're trying to destroy mine right now in the courts. It's not going to work. I've got belief in the justice system, and it's not going to work at all. And I've got support from my family and friends, and obviously other critics as well. But I've spoken to critics like John Atack, for example, who's written the book A Piece of Blue Sky. And he was taken to court, and of course court costs, he's lost a house, and he's lost a lot, basically, because of his campaign against Scientology. I forgot to mention, when I first got into Scientology, I was newly married. I had a house, a car, and a job. And when I left, I'd lost my house, my job, and my car. Yeah. And they tried to make my wife leave me. So I was able to keep a hold. But I did lose that. And I lost, obviously, about 10 grand in cash. So there is a cost. There is a price to pay. And I want other people not to have to go through that feeling of hope that you get when Scientology first works for you. It's quite priceless. But I think it might be like a drug user's first fix. Like, how you hear about people who are always trying to achieve that first sensation. I think Scientology is a lot like that. Yeah. That's how they hook you,
Yeah.
That
makes sense to me. And when I think about everything that we know, that's a matter of public record about the things that Scientology has involved themselves in, whether it's, dragging people's good names through the mud, or more horrific instances like what happened with Lisa McPherson and all of these others that have literally lost their lives because of Scientology, directly or otherwise. And then you talk about the rehabilitation force and all of this stuff, and it keeps coming back to, in my mind, and the analogy that I'm thinking is, if there was just name any, religion, whether it's a Christian church or a synagogue, and it came out that they were trapping people in the basement and not feeding them and treating them horribly, there would be this giant public outcry. But Scientology, for some reason, gets away with it, and they manage to maintain this tax-exempt status. So is it fair to say that a big part of the fight against Scientology is to try to get this tax-exempt status removed so that they can be held more accountable?
Oh, definitely. I think that has to be the primary goal. Obviously, there'll be lots and lots of lesser goals, which would be getting individuals to realize and walk out. Because the way out, of course, is the door, Yeah. But without a doubt, that has to be the primary goal of all critics. And I do believe that you can actually complain to the IRS. I think if you go to Jeffrey Augustine's site, he will show you what to actually do, what's the correct form to fill in. And it can be done. It can be done that way. Hopefully now, because they've been on the rack so many times before, and they've squirmed out away and carried on,
Yeah.
So even I'm an optimist by nature, but I am just waiting to see what happens.
Yeah.
Hopefully, going clear and the sort of groundswell of feeling, hopefully that will actually go some ways to actually hopefully dealing with this menace, as it is.
Pete, what would you say is the status of the Church of Scientology right now? Are they dwindling in numbers? Are they, they put on this public face that they're bigger and better than ever, but is the reality something different?
Oh yeah, there's no question about it. When I was around in the 1990s, there were 38 missions in the UK. I think they've now got 1.5. I've actually phoned up every single Scientology organization just to see if they were there. Obviously, it's a worldwide thing. I didn't phone at 3 a.m. I made sure that I was calling them at a time when they said they'd be open. And I forget the actual figures now. I made a video about it. But there were places where nobody answered the phone. And if that was the case, I had somebody else do a follow-up call to see if they did answer the phone at another time. Some of them did, some of them didn't. But you see, a Scientology organization isn't allowed to close. It's the policy. They're not allowed to close. So even if there's no one there, they will never announce that it's closed, okay? Because that would mean that Scientology is shrinking, and they can never, ever admit to that. It's like the whole thing about the millions of members. Once they'd said there were 8 million members, they couldn't say there was less than 8 million members, so they had to go up from there. The truth is, I mean, the estimate anyway, no one knows for sure, is somewhere around 50,000. Wow. I think, I'm not sure if it was Mark Headley or Jefferson Hawkins who said, because they had access to the list of Scientology membership and numbers of people who went to the international Scientology events, I'm pretty sure they said it was never more than 38,000. So again...
Is that worldwide?
Yes.
Wow.
And again, we've got a small number, but it's powerful, and it's dangerous, and it's wealthy. And it's absolutely ruthless. So, you know, it's I personally feel it's actually worse than the mafia, you know.
Yeah.
I really do, simply because the mafia doesn't hide the fact that it's the mafia, okay?
Right.
Scientology pretends to be this beneficial organization where they've got this drug rehabilitation program that's actually killed people.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't realize that. Oh, I'm sorry.
Exactly. And one of the worst cases for me, because I've met the mother of Kyle Brennan, who was a young fella who was staying with his father in Clearwater, and he was shot. He was killed. And the tragedy, this happened in 2007, and it's easy to find out. The tragedy is that to this day, his mum does not know what happened that night, because the Scientologists have lied and lied and lied to protect Scientology. The Clearwater police force, it looks like, have lied as well. So, you know, hopefully this case will be reopened and we'll get it examined. But there's a mother who for the last 7-8 years has been just wanting to know what happened. And she doesn't know because Scientologists have lied and lied and lied. And I just find that an absolute tragedy. They've no heart. These people have no heart.
Yeah, and you know, I think part of the reason why this is so incredibly important, even if their numbers are dwindling, is the I'll just say maniacs at the top of the pyramid in Scientology. They have no intentions of slowing down. They're still trying to build Scientology. Tell me about this thing where they're buying buildings everywhere. I heard that they were just like buying empty buildings all over the place.
Oh yeah. Chris Shelton is another commentator on the subject. He's actually wonderful on this one because he was involved with this. They came up with the scheme some time ago. Okay, like you know how we talked earlier about how you go up all these different progression of levels in Scientology? Well, the highest level you can reach is now OT 8. And they promised to be able to release OT 9 and 10 at some point. But then they realized probably that they didn't have an OT 9 and 10. So they had to have something to keep people paying. Because once you've reached the end, you're not going to carry on paying in, are you? Right. Okay, maybe there's a crisis where some suppressive persons are attacking us and we need some funds for that. But what could we do to keep these people giving us money? And they came up with this scheme of creating the ideal org. And org is short for organization. It simply means a Scientology church, as they like to call it, to fool you into thinking they're religious. We have to say that. And what they do is they choose, let's say in some location, they choose a really nice building, and they set about asking their members for the funds to buy this building. And then eventually they do. They raise the money, they brag about it, they show fundraising events where they all dress up as, I don't know, characters from the Wizard of Oz or something. I mean, they try to turn these things into like fun party events, but the photographs that you see, no one looks too happy, because, and I tell you exactly how these events work. Everyone arrives. They lock the door. They lock the door. And then they have a board in front and they write down a number and they say, okay, let's say for argument's sake, 1 million. And they say, we are not leaving this room until we've reached this figure. And everybody's got to, oh yeah. And then they embarrass people. They even have a technique where if they can get one person to contribute X amount, they embarrass other people into trying to contribute a greater amount. And it's purely and simply raising money for the sake of raising money. Obviously, they say it's to buy the building. So they buy the building. And then what happens is they sign it over to the International Landlord's Office, so that the International Landlord's Office becomes the owner of the building that these people have just bought, right? I've seen the International Landlord's Office. It's in Clearwater, and it didn't look like anybody had been in that door in years. It's an empty building with a name outside saying International Landlord's Office. Oh, yeah. So, what happens then is they carry on fundraising for the next stage, which is the design stage. So then they have to raise money to get designs made and approved. Okay. And then when they've done that, they have another fundraising, which is to actually get the work carried out. Now, you probably know that in most cities you need to have permits to do this and permits to do that.
Right.
So all that's got to be taken into account as well. So it's a constant stream of funds. Now, it used to be that one city would fund one ideologue, but they've realised them with the dwindling numbers. So what they're doing now is they're grouping them all together. So, for example, it's like the whole of the UK is grouped together, and they concentrate on doing one, because they haven't got the numbers to do it like they were doing, city by city. The whole of the southwest of the US is one area, so they're including like the whole of Florida and those neighbouring states. I think as far as St. Louis, as one grouping, and they're having to do it this way. The whole of Europe is one grouping, whereas at one time Madrid was able to buy its own building. Now Madrid and Czechoslovakia are all included in the one big grouping. Because again, the dwindling numbers mean you can't keep milking these people for what they haven't got. That's the ideologue scam in a nutshell. So. Oh, and then the best part, this is the best bit, once you've bought the building and handed it over to the International Landlord's Office and you've paid for the design and development and you've paid for the renovations and you have your big opening, okay, you then have to rent it from the International Landlord's Office.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So there are these ideologues all around the world, and people send in photographs. Tony Ortega's blog is a great place to keep updated, and Mike Rinder's blog is also a wonderful resource. These places are empty. The car park have like one car or two cars on it. Mike Rinder reported last week that the Nashville ideologue car park was empty, and they took a photograph. And when the guy went back to take a follow-up photograph, there were two police cars parked there. So I don't know what was going on. Obviously, they felt they needed protection. So,
wow.
So it is. I mean, the good thing is that the longer it goes on, the harder it is to maintain the lie that it is a scam. I've spoken to Scientologists. I've told them, please listen to me. You're being lied to. And they don't believe me because I'm a suppressive person who's evil, who's trying to stop mankind from going free and all this nonsense. My heart goes out to them, it really does, because I know that if they only knew, or if they only could bring themselves to look at the facts like we can do, it wouldn't take long for the curtain to drop or the penny to drop, and they could walk out the door.
Yeah.
It's sad, isn't it?
It truly is. And, they have these different things that they try to do to sort of pretty up the exterior of Scientology. And they're involved in so many things that you don't necessarily know are Scientology right out the gate. And one example is when I used to work for Amazon.com. And I was just, customer service. And one day, I was helping a customer who was purchasing a book called Psychiatry and Industry of Death.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought it sounded fascinating. I'm interested in the topic. I'm personally skeptical of some different, psychiatric drugs and stuff like that. So I thought, well, I will order this and I will check it out. And it came to me along with a booklet, and I watched it. And there is no mention through that entire documentary of Scientology. But you do hear about something called the Citizens Commission on Human Rights, which sounds very official and very formal and very fancy, you know?
Yeah.
And
what you find is that usually all of these front groups are the same group of hardworking Scientologists in any given location.
It was really interesting to find out that this was Scientology behind it, and the same thing as you mentioned with, you know, Narcotics Anonymous and all of these things, that there's this front that's helping people, and in reality it's as we've established, very much hurting people. Pete, what is your website online, and tell people how they can find out more about you and your cause, and, you know, just some recommended places where they should go to learn more about this and how they can get involved.
Okay, well, there's a number of different things going on. Mostly ex-Scientologists island.org. I know that's quite a long, quite lengthy, and if you get it right, you get into like a gold mine of stuff. John Dignan, the author, has his. We host his webpage where he writes about his latest stuff. John's actually a wonderful author. He was in the Sea Organization for over 20 years, and he had to escape in much the same way Mark Headley did. We also have links on there to a number of publications you can get for free. You can read them for free. So we have a lot of information on that particular site. I also have created a site, like the Scientologists, as you mentioned in Freedom magazine, how they attack critics.
Yeah.
And they usually buy up sites like whoismikegrinder.com, whoismartyrathburn.com. And I discovered that there was no whoisPeteGriffiths.com. So I bought it. Now I'm using it at the moment to host a legal appeal where I'm asking for people just to help throw some money in my direction to pay my lawyers to keep Scientology at bay, you know. But I'm not asking for much, but every little penny helps. I swear
Certainly.
to God. They were the two main sites that I'm involved with. Now there are other wonderful resources. One of the easiest ones to remember is xenu.net. xenu.net. That is full of information, and as I mentioned already, Tony Ortega's blog, Mike Rinder's blog, Marty Rathburn's blog. There's a tremendous amount of good stuff out there. Jeffrey Augustine's, Karen de la Carriere. There's so much stuff out there. Once you start to research into this, you can find that it becomes an obsession, and I would recommend, if you haven't got the rest of your life to waste on this subject, don't go anywhere near. But hopefully the day of justice is near. You know, let's just keep that hope alive. And you know,
I would say so. You know, it really feels like it. We see people like you out there, you know, spreading the word and being visible. We've got this documentary that everybody's talking about. We've got high profile people. Finally.
Well, I think it's worth noting that until the protests began in 2008 under the banner of Anonymous, because people hid their faces knowing what Scientology would try and do, which they did, more and more people have felt the fear be removed.
Yeah.
And it goes back to February 2008. What that Anonymous action did was take away the fear of Scientology. And just coincidentally, it sort of like helped me to face the fear of going up against them.
Right.
And I think, I'm not too sure of the exact figures, but there's been something like close on 20 publications since then, books that have been written. And there are books being written all the time by ex-members telling their story. I think in the previous 20 years, there was just a handful. So really, I think you've really got to pay homage to what happened back then. And the fact that it's given people a mouthpiece, if you like, and given people the courage to speak out about this dreadful organization. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And one final thing that I just thought of that I wanted to ask you about, is Anonymous still as involved in the anti-Scientology thing as they once were? Because I don't see them connected with that anymore as much.
Well, that's an interesting question, and I honestly don't know the answer. I think some of the people that were originally involved back in 2008 are interested, but I would say that the majority of them have moved on, and like a lot were just young people who were just students with nothing better to do, and I think they've either got girlfriends or boyfriends or gone to college or left college or whatever and moved on. But some, I think, are still involved. I think some of the people that were involved in the original setting up of Project Scientology are around still. The Scientologists, incidentally, accused me of being an anonymous organizer, and once they've done this, they then list all the things that anonymous people have been convicted of in the hope that somehow it'll reflect on me. Well, Scientology, I'm sad to say, I am not an anonymous organizer, and I never have been. So when that one comes to court, we'll have some fun, won't we?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. But they seem to think that it's like a terrible, terrible label, because they believe, like, they produced a DVD that said that Anonymous was cyber terrorists, and they still come out with this one to this day about how this organization, I mean, you'd have to see it for yourself. I've actually never seen it, but I've been told about it. And how that if they smear somebody, they try to smear everyone with this anonymous ticket because it means that you're this evil cyber terrorist. Well, good luck with that.
Well, and it is true that part of the Scientology doctrine is that if you are a suppressive person, it is perfectly okay within to lie. I mean, that's part. I can't remember the exact wording, but that's
the fair game policy. It states that you may be tricked, lied to, sued, or destroyed. Whatever you want to think about that particular wording, but that's exactly what they do. In the court case I'm involved in, looking through Scientologist affidavits, there's so much stuff in there that's not true. I'm not going to call them liars, but there's stuff in there that simply is not true, that they've signed and stated as being true. Based on what? I've no idea, but no doubt that'll all come out when it does. But that's what they do. I mean, if you can't find, these crimes that the suppressive persons are supposed to have, if you can't find them, Hubbard advises that you just make them up. So
it all comes back to Hubbard. I mean, all of this, all of the schemes and the things that they do to this day.
It does.
He invented all of it.
Even the front groups are a sort of aspect of Hubbard's personality. The hatred of psychiatry. Like on the surface, it's done to correct psychiatric abuses. The reality is that they never correct any psychiatric abuses. They simply just use it to promote Scientology. They would also set themselves up. They would take the Narcanon, get rid of the name because now it's bad, and they'd call it something like Freedom Rehabilitation Center or something. We have life improvement centers that don't mention Scientology. We have test centers, like we mentioned the Oxford capacity analysis. They don't mention Oxford anymore in some of them, and they don't mention Scientology, and they certainly don't mention Hubbard. So they are kind of being driven underground, which I'm not sure that's a good thing. It might be a good idea to quickly mention how Russia tried to ban all publications because it deemed that they were subversive. And they actually are. Because let's Scientology wants to take over the world. I know how crazy that sounds, but that's what they want to do. They want to basically rule the world. Banning the books, I don't think is the right way to go. I think making them available so that people can read them and make up their own minds is a good move. Yeah, definitely.
Yes. And that is a very important point, because you can find pretty much any Scientology book ever written. You can find these published online, so you don't have to. It's not speculation.
And they don't all have crap written on the inside cover.
It's kind of special. I kept the book because I
know what. You must scan that and send it to me.
I will. It's what we call truth in advertising.
Yeah. It's good that the person should warn you on the first page.
Well, I figured this person must have sincerely been somehow deeply involved for him to have such a visceral reaction to not even want to take my 50 cents from me for the book. But
it gets fascinating though. Like where like if anti-Scientology books get put into libraries, Scientologists go in and steal them out. Okay. Wow. Okay, stealing's a crime, but they do. Now they wouldn't have this written down on paper as evidence, so we can't take them to court, but they've been advised to do that, definitely.
And they can justify it because it's protecting...
It's helping mankind, which nobody else is. We're just suppressive persons who don't care about helping mankind and freedom and getting rid of all these body thetans and so on, We didn't talk about body thetans,
We didn't. Do you have the time?
Of course, yeah, we have to mention these body thetans.
We didn't talk about Xenu.
No, well, let's just do it now, shall we?
Yes, let's do it.
According to Hubbard, 75 million years ago, there was a catastrophe in this sector of the universe. Okay, long story short, basically there's a tyrannical galactic overlord called Xenu, who apparently you could also spell Xemu, and I don't know how this was done, that 75 million years ago they spoke English with the Roman alphabet, but there you go. He was the ruler of 76 planets or something, and this area was called Space Station 33. I mean, this is pure science fiction, which is why I mentioned earlier how science fiction becomes Scientology, and he had an overpopulation problem. So he also had a renegade problem where people were going to unelect him. How you unelect a galactic emperor, I have no idea. I thought they were in for life. But anyway, so he called people in for the tax inspections. It's just crazy, isn't it, really?
It truly
because, you're only going to get rid of people who pay taxes. Anyway, whilst called in for the tax inspections, people were given an injection of alcohol and glycol, which froze them, and I don't know if it killed them or not, I'm not sure on that detail, but then they were boxed up in boxes, put into something that resembled a DC-8 aeroplane, except that it had fans instead of propellers, and it flew across space from around the location of the North Star to this planet, which is called Tigiak.
Tigiak is Earth.
Tigiak is Earth, yeah. And then all these boxes were stacked around the bases of volcanoes. Now, he actually names the volcanoes. The interesting thing is that some scholar took this story and applied science to it and went, well, would those volcanoes have been in the same places? And the answer is no. 75 million years ago, would there be any volcanoes in Hawaii? No. Would there be any Hawaii? No. So anyway, isn't this wonderful far-fetched nonsense? Anyway, not content with stacking these people, if they were people, because they were aliens, obviously, in boxes around volcanoes, they then drop H-bombs on top of these volcanoes. So what happens is all these bodies and boxes and beings all float up into the air. Now in Scientology, it's like you don't have a soul, you are a soul. Mm-hmm. And it's like an immortal spirit and it has no mass. So this is how it can live independently of the body, because you die and you leave your body and you leave your body behind. So that's what happens. All these things go up into the air. So beings and boxes and bodies are all in this dreadful, volcanic, apocalyptic vision of the end of the world, except it didn't end the world. Because Xenu then erects some kind of electronic ribbon and catches up all the souls that are floating around. And apparently there were some tremendous winds going around as well, and basically everyone gets hoovered up. Can we say hoovered?
Yes.
Would you? Yes. Yes. Okay. So everyone gets hoovered up. And here's the good bit. Here's the best bit. They all get put in front of these super colossal 3D motion pictures and are forced to watch films about the god and the devil, and that's why we believe in God and the devil. There.
Oh, my Lord.
Oh, woo. So imagine paying $300,000 and getting a piece of paper that said that.
I mean, I imagine that the people who make it to that level, who open up that information, that sacred information that they've spent so much money and time and lost probably so much to get to that point, I imagine that there's this moment, it's got to be just utter cognitive dissonance. Somehow you've got to rationalize this, you know. And so then where does a Scientologist go from there once they learn this?
Oh, that's
amazing
OT3.
info?
That's OT3. They then got to do 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Well, here's the thing. Now, I'll come back to that in a second.
Mm-hmm.
I do know people who read that, and that was the moment. That was the moment they went, uh-oh, this is a crock. And they walked.
Yeah.
I know others who had to go for a walk just to clear their head and go, what the hell?
Right.
And then started to go, but what if it's just true? What if it is true? So, again, it can be a cathartic moment for them to do this OT3 level. Now, what happens is it gets actually slightly worse. All these like beings who are now implanted with notions of God and the devil are known as thetans, because that's the Scientology word for spirit. But they cluster together for some reason in groups. And basically, you know, we said earlier how you clear yourself of your own reactive mind.
Yeah.
When you get to OT3, you have to clear yourself of all the body thetans that are stuck to your body from this OT3 incident. Okay. So, when you've done that, you then go to OT4, and the end result of OT3 is no more body thetans, and guess what? You find you've got more body thetans to get rid of. And it's the same on OT5, 6, 7, and 8. You're getting rid of these body thetans, even though you supposedly got rid of them all in OT3. So, like, rationally, none of it makes any sense. It's just absolute nonsense. And yet, when you've invested maybe, I don't know, 10, 15 years, it depends, it's different for everybody, it can be less. When you've spent that much money, when all the people around you are smiling and looking happy and saying how wonderful it all is, it's very difficult to sort of go, whoa, you people are crazy, I'm out of here, you know.
Right.
Which would be the normal thing to do. Jason Begay, the actor, has some wonderful things to say about the whole experience, about finding out, about really being conned, and he's very, very forthright in the way he presents it. So if anyone doesn't like the use of 4-letter words, I suggest they don't particularly watch that one. But if you can look through that and just listen to what he's saying, then it's absolutely wonderful, because he just tells it straight, you know.
Yeah.
Which hopefully one day we'll get Tom Cruise and John Travolta to do the same. You know, we might
that
be
would be a
there
coup.
now.
That really
Wouldn't
would
it
be
just?
a coup.
Yeah, absolutely it would.
Well, just
So,
recently, Lisa Redeny left Scientology, and there was such a big deal about it when she left. I mean, I guess not super recently. It's been, what, a year or so now?
I think so, yeah.
But you don't hear about her so much anymore. Did they come after her?
I don't think so. I think they've basically tried to criticize her as being, you know, a wannabe actress or whatever. But I mean, she's not. I mean, she's quite successful.
Yeah.
I think some people they know to leave them alone. But Lisa Marie Presley is another one who we suspect has left simply because of some of her songs seem to be talking about a life out of Scientology, but her mother's still in. So you get that, you know, we talked about that earlier, about the whole disconnection thing, and how, well, if you carry on like this, you know, you're going to lose your family. You know, it's a horrible choice to have to make.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So maybe, you know, maybe Lisa is out, but she's not talking too openly because it will upset her mum. I don't know. But all that kind of stuff is like bullying and blackmail, and there can be no place for people like that, you know, in any decent society anyway.
There's just so much dishonesty. It's interesting when you're telling the story about, the Galactic Lord Xenu. I came upon earlier today this section of the Scientology website that I wasn't even looking for anything about aliens. It just was something that came up in a search. And there's this page in their frequently asked questions. It's titled, "Do Scientologists believe they are descended from aliens?" And they write, "Absolutely not. Scientology holds no such belief, and any suggestion otherwise is absurd." And then they go on to say, "Some of the information one finds on the internet concerning Scientology religious beliefs is a mixture of misstatements, distortions, and outright lies designed to twist Scientology theology. These are scurrilous statements issued by the internet fringe and are not only patently untrue, they are intentionally designed to ridicule Scientologists and denigrate their actual religious beliefs." And Pete, what occurs to me is the entire system of Scientology is designed this self-empowerment and the saving of the world. But isn't it interesting that so much of Scientology seems to be about self-victimization? That we are the victims, we're under attack, you know what I'm saying? It's very contradictory.
Yes, that's the interesting thing. They're trying to sell you this ability, but the truth is you actually become less able. Mm-hmm. And it's only when you look back on it that you see that you're actually worse off. See, you convince yourself that you're better off, that you're more intelligent, that you have these greater abilities, but the truth is you are worse off. I don't know. Well, I mean, there are a few rich and wealthy Scientologists, but it's only a handful. Yeah. Like the ones I know of in Ireland are struggling. They're starving. It's dreadful. It's absolutely dreadful. But you can't show that. Here's the other thing as well. And you're not allowed to talk about any wins or gains you have in Scientology. You're not allowed to share anything with anybody in Scientology. So you can't even share freely any ideas you have about the subject. You're not allowed to. You're supposed to get these superpowers when you do the OT levels, but you're not allowed to show them, because that would create a backlash against Scientologists who are able to move matter by the force of their mind. So don't do it. Don't let anyone see that you can do it. So the end result is that you've got all these people walking around. There's probably 1,000 or so. I don't know how many. Who think that they can possibly do this, but know really that they can't. Right. Come on. I think James Randi, who's put $1 million on the table and said, "Look, come on, show me your powers, and I'll give you $1 million." And no one's came forward.
Right. And then it also serves to keep the rest of the Scientologists completely clueless that these abilities do not exist, because
absolutely,
it's just, oh, well, they can do it, they just can't show me.
And here's the other thing as well. The wording of the piece that you read out, mm-hmm. that we don't believe we're descended from aliens. Yeah. So if you were to then say, "Oh, well, do you believe then that your body is infested with the souls of dead alien spirits?" Well, put it that way. See, and they do get into this. If you ask a Scientologist a direct question and you don't ask the right question, they can happily lie to you. Yeah. You really have to dig, and you really have to ask the exact right question so that they cannot squirm out of it. And I know this because I used to be a Scientology spokesperson, so I used to do these mental flips. Do Scientologists believe in drugs? No. Do Scientologists drink alcohol? Well, occasionally, but not much. So you get used to answering in a way that makes you seem. Here's another thing. Very quickly while I think about it, mm-hmm. Hubbard advises Scientologists to act normal, right? What? Are you kidding me? Oh yeah, dress like the people around you, act like the people around you. if everyone's wearing suits, you wear suits, have haircuts, don't stand out, don't show your secret powers, don't let anyone know. What kind of advice is that? Do you ever watch any of those science fiction movies like Invasion of the Body Snatchers and things like that? I actually sometimes believe that it's actually like that they, through a process of conversion, they change you into some kind of alien being. And by God, they do.
Yeah.
But here's another thing that we didn't talk about. It's like Scientology isn't a belief system, according to them. It's about knowing. So Scientology, according to them, means knowing how to know. You don't have to believe anything. You know. Now, the interesting thing is that from the position that I'm in now, I can see that them thinking that they know is a belief, right?
Right.
And it's incredible when you talk to them. When you actually hit home with the point, they tend to be silent. When you don't hit home, they talk back at you and fire back with all kinds of stuff. But I know when I've hit home is when they go quiet, because it's that cognitive dissonance period where their mind's going blah.
Yep. How do I process this? How do I respond?
Yeah.
Unreal. And one other thing we didn't really talk about, but the big ruler of Scientology now, the man who stands in the place, not in the place of L. Ron Hubbard, but who is the leader, David Miscavige. I find it fascinating because he is this person that on the outside, just watching him, he's so blatantly arrogant, and he so blatantly wants to be seen almost as like the king of Scientology. But it's interesting to me because his entire goal, it seems to be to, the continuation of Scientology, the amassing of this wealth for Scientology to do these different things. But do you think, and this might just be pure speculation, do you think that he is a true believer?
Ooh, good question. No, I don't think for 1 minute. I don't think he ever was. I think he saw right through it from day one. And I think even before Hubbard died, he was making plans as to how he could take over the thing once Hubbard was gone. I don't know if any of that's true. Jesse Prince might be able to tell us more about that when he finishes his book, which he's talking about the last few years of Hubbard's life, which should be absolutely wonderful to read. But that's my own take on it. I don't believe for 1 minute that he thinks any of it's true. I don't know if you saw the interview with him. Who was he? I forget who he was talking about. It's his only recorded interview. And it's mind-boggling to watch the guy in action, because as you said, he's arrogant, he's full of himself. It's incredible. Let me think of the... I can't remember the name. It's the one where he's wearing a blue suit. It's about 20 years ago. If anyone was really interested and they looked for David Miscavige's TV interview, then it would come up, because it's the only one. But no, I don't think for 1 minute that he believes any of it. He probably does believe that the whole thing could be a movement of people believing in it, sending money, because all the money ultimately goes to him.
Sure.
Oh yeah. All the power flows to him. I mean, it is totally a pyramid with him at the top. So what's been happening since 2008 and slightly before is that Scientology as a monster feeds on new people and money. So at the bottom of the pyramid is this huge mouth sucking up all this money and people. That started to dry up. So we're going to get this like pyramid, if you like, with the bottom layer removed and getting smaller and smaller and smaller. We know what's going to happen. The whole thing's going to collapse, right? So hopefully any day now, hopefully.
I think we see it happening, and for that reason,
I think so too.
I am so grateful for what you're doing. And Pete, I've kept you longer than I even intended to, longer than I promised. But can we have a conversation again on the show? You can be my resident Scientology guy.
if you don't mind, and if we get a good reaction, then I'm happy to do so.
Absolutely. I think we certainly will. I've been telling people that I was going to have a Scientology episode coming up with an ex-Scientologist, and people have been asking me about it constantly. So we're going to I think enlighten a lot of people with this, and for that I'm so grateful to you and thankful that you gave me the time. Pete, thank you so very much.
You're more than welcome, Natalina. Thank
you. You've been listening to Beyond Extraordinary with Natalina. For the latest headlines and program schedule, please visit extraordinaryintelligence.com.